"Sir, step back. First class isn't for people like you." Those words didn't just fall into the air, they sliced through it like a blade. Cold, rehearsed, unbothered, the kind of dismissal that doesn't invite questions. Captain Sarah Mitchell didn't even bother to make eye contact when she said it. Her hand flicked toward the rear of the aircraft like she was batting away a fly. Julian Hayes stood there absorbing the sharp edge of her voice, his posture calm but resolute. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit or a flashy watch. No briefcase, just a simple grey button-down navy slacks and loafers that had clearly been walked in. To the untrained eye, he looked like a man out of place. But Julian wasn't out of place. He was out of patience. A few passengers glanced up, curiosity flickering in their eyes like matches not yet struck. One man, white mid-50s, silver hair, slicked back, and a watch that screamed old money shoved his leather briefcase onto the shared table. "Let's keep this area clear," he muttered with a territorial growl. His tone dripped with status, his posture with judgment. Julian didn't respond. Not yet. This wasn't the first time he'd been looked at like a problem, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But this time there was something different in the air, something brewing. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward, taking Julian's boarding stub between two fingers, as if even touching it would stain her. "Unverified," she said flatly, snapping the paper back against his chest. "Security will be notified if you don't return to your assigned section." Julian still didn't speak. He simply turned his head slightly and glanced toward the briefcase that now rested where his own had been before it was moved without consent. The man beside it reclined, radiating smugness. His name was Richard Holt, a private equity mogul with failed ventures hidden behind golden handshakes. He looked at Julian the way someone might glance at a stain on a clean shirt not worthy of notice, but somehow offensive anyway. Across the aisle, a younger man angled his phone just enough to capture the moment. Liam Chen, 31, a sharp-eyed travel blogger with millions of followers, had seen discrimination before. But this felt surgically precise. It was the assumption, the automatic downgrade based on skin attire and silence. Julian wasn't just any passenger, he was the CEO of Zenith Technologies. He had bought the entire aviation firm just last year, but today he chose to board without announcement, part of an ethics audit he had launched quietly. He wanted to see how his employees treated passengers who didn't look like they belonged. Now he had his answer, and what came next would shake every inch of the cabin. Julian had designed the ethics audit to be discreet, a quiet observation from the inside out. He wasn't just testing professionalism. He was gauging character, instinct, and humanity when no one was watching. But now they were watching, and the test had already spiraled far beyond policy. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood tall, her uniform pristine, her authority tightly coiled like a spring. She had survived the merger with Zenith Aviation only because of tenure, not because of merit. And buried beneath her clipped words was resentment, deep and aging like rust. To her, Julian was an intrusion into a world she believed she owned, a world she couldn't imagine him belonging to. She turned to her first officer, muttering just loud enough, "I'm flagging this guy, he's delaying our departure." Then projecting to the rest of the cabin, "Folks, apologies for the hold-up. We're resolving a seating issue." The words dripped with fake politeness, like syrup masking poison. Julian remained expressionless, but inside something hardened. His jaw tensed slightly. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding, it was a declaration, a message dressed in policy but sown from prejudice. Richard Holt leaned over again, flashing a first-class elite badge with a smirk. "I specifically requested privacy," he said, not to anyone in particular, but to the air loud enough for others to hear. "I assume you'll resolve this." Sarah nodded like she was receiving a corporate directive, not feeding a narrative of exclusion. Julian didn't flinch, he didn't argue. He simply tapped the discreet earpiece in his right ear and spoke calmly, "Anna, activate Protocol 3. Back at Zenith Technologies headquarters miles away, Anukika Sharma didn't hesitate. "It's set, sir," she replied. Her voice was smooth, but her blood boiled. She'd seen moments like this before. She knew exactly what was about to unfold. It wasn't just a bad decision, it was a career-ending one. Liam leaned over, voice quiet but urgent. "This isn't right, you know that. Julian nodded once. Log it, Liam. The blogger's fingers danced across his phone. Zenith Aviation crew profiles black passenger as non-priority. No ID check, no grace, just dismissal in his own jet. Within seconds, the post was live. Within seconds, the fire was lit. Sarah placed a hand near the cabin's wall console. We'll need to verify you before this can go any further, she said. Or you can leave. Those are your options. Julian's voice was even almost too calm. Or you verify your own conduct first. Because what you're doing, that will have consequences. Behind her, Emma Walsh, the flight attendant, stepped forward. She said nothing. Her fingers moved quickly on her company-issued tablet, scanning the passenger manifest. Julian saw her hesitate just briefly, then double-tap. A notification pinged at Zenith headquarters. Passenger unauthorized. Recommend removal. No explanation, no ID scan, no protocol followed. Just a label typed and filed, judgment sealed into pixels. Back in the cabin, Richard Holt scribbled something on a folded napkin and placed it on Julian's tray table before walking off with an air of triumph. Julian picked it up and unfolded it. Try budget flights. He folded it again slowly, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and looked back at Sarah. You're destroying everything this company stands for, 1 second at a time. At the front of the cabin, a digital ping broke the silence. Liam had just posted a photo of the napkin. In 3 minutes, it had over 2,000 likes. The countdown had begun. Julian remained seated. His stillness wasn't weakness, it was deliberate. He knew what power looked like. It wasn't loud, it wasn't panicked. It was quiet, focused, and unshakable. Across the aisle, Malik Jordan, a rising tech founder, watched in silence. He recognized the moment for what it was. The microaggressions, the calculated escalation, the comfort with which someone like Julian could be humiliated publicly and efficiently. Malik had seen it before, lived it before, but this time something was shifting. Julian reached down and adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, his voice steady. If you thought this was going to end quietly, you've misread the moment. His smart ring vibrated a soft pulse that meant Protocol 3 had reached its first escalation threshold. From the other side of the cabin, Liam Chen was still typing, fingers relentless. Zenith Aviation black CEO profiled, dismissed and threatened on his own aircraft. They didn't even scan his ID. This isn't policy, this is strategy. The post went up. Notifications followed like sparks igniting dry grass. Captain Sarah turned toward her first officer, voice just low enough to maintain deniability. I've had enough. He's not listed. If he won't leave, we escalate. Moments later, First Officer Thomas Blake stormed down the aisle with the kind of intensity usually reserved for mid-air emergencies. He's not on the verified manifest, Sarah said, firmly, loud enough for several rows to hear. If he's refusing to comply, we may need security. Thomas squared up in front of Julian like a bouncer at a velvet rope. Sir, you'll need to leave this cabin immediately or be escorted out. Julian looked up at him slowly. Calm, clear, then verify me. He tapped his ring again, sending a second signal, this time directly to Zenith's command suite. Back at HQ, Anukita Sharma monitored the live stream of cabin activity. Her console lit up red. Manual override detected. Emma Walsh flagged Julian as unauthorized without confirmation. She picked up the line. Sir, she's falsifying the log. No ID check, no scan. I'm locking the system and filing a formal complaint. Julian gave a subtle nod and stayed in place. Meanwhile, Emma's fingers moved across her screen like a pianist playing a dirge. Tap, tap, enter, passenger unauthorized, behavior disruptive. Action escalate. Back in the aisle, Richard Holt smirked and leaned toward Julian. This is what happens when you let just anyone think they can buy a seat in here, he muttered. The words were ugly, but more importantly, they were loud enough to be caught on Liam's phone. Liam didn't flinch. He typed again. Zenith crew allows open slurs, racial bias on full display. $1 million seats, $1 billion shame. His post crossed 2 million views within minutes. Comments flooded in. Name the airline, tag the FAA, drop the faces, this needs national coverage. An aviation journalist responded within seconds, DM me now. We'll publish by midnight. But the harassment didn't stop. Captain Sarah returned to Julian, a forced smile plastered across her face. You could always apply for a maintenance role, sir. We're always looking for people who know how planes work." Someone laughed. A few others winced. Richard, emboldened, added with a sneer, "Wouldn't be the first time someone like you tried to pretend they belonged." Julian didn't stand, didn't raise his voice, but his words cut through the noise. "You're violating every standard your badge is supposed to represent. And this," he gestured to the falsified manifest, "this will cost you." The air in the cabin grew heavier. Passengers looked around, some unsure whether they were witnessing a meltdown or a reckoning. But Liam, still filming, knew exactly what it was. It was a moment, and it was about to erupt. The air inside the cabin felt pressurized not by altitude, but by truth. Thick, unavoidable, and humming beneath every breath. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away, others locked eyes with Julian as if silently willing him to stand firm. Then, without fanfare, Julian's smart ring buzzed again. This time it wasn't a warning, it was clearance. From her Zenith HQ console, Anukika's voice came through clearly in his earpiece. "Julian, I'm escalating to Eleanor. Emma just submitted your removal as a security threat without any verification. Protocol 303 initiated. All internal logs are being preserved. Don't move." Julian nodded slightly and remained still. From across the aisle, Liam whispered, "Zeniths, about to see who they're really dealing with." And then the cabin displays flickered. News updates began scrolling across the forward monitor. Bloomberg alert: passenger mistreatment on Zenith aviation flight. Sparks viral outrage, racial profiling suspected. Sarah saw the headline. Her posture stiffened. She stormed back up the aisle and grabbed Julian's briefcase, which had been quietly returned to its place. "Unclaimed item," she said flatly, stowing it in a cabinet. Julian didn't respond. Not yet. But Richard Holt wasn't finished. With a theatrical gesture, he stood up again. "This gentleman boarded without clearance," he proclaimed. "I saw it myself." He pushed past the gate staff. "Check the security footage." It was a lie. Everyone knew it. Liam had filmed Julian boarding, quietly escorted by a uniformed gate agent. But the lie, once spoken, settled like oil on water, impossible to remove cleanly. "That's false," Liam said sharply, his voice louder than expected. "I watched him board. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't push past anyone." "Stop lying." Sarah ignored him completely. "Passengers, please remain seated. We are investigating a manifest discrepancy." It was sanitized language, designed to sound official to mask intention with process. But back at HQ, Elena Ruiz wasn't fooled. She was already preparing formal misconduct charges. Elena Anukika called out, "They just logged Julian as a trespasser." "Let them," Julian said calmly. "It won't change what's coming." Just then, Liam's latest post crossed 500,000 views. Security threat. Numb. This is a threat to their narrative. This man isn't a danger, he's a mirror. An aviation reporter, quote, posted, "If this is how Zenith treats the CEO of their own company, imagine the rest." And inside the cabin, Julian's calm deepened. Richard leaned toward him again, smug as ever. "There's nothing you can do. They've already decided what you are." Julian's voice was soft but cutting. "And they're about to remember who I am." Emma, still clutching her tablet, like a lifeline, tapped again, this time marking Julian's seat as vacant. While he was still in it, Liam caught the moment on camera. They just marked Dr. Hayes' seat empty. "This is coordinated. This is criminal." For the first time, Liam typed Julian's name aloud, in a post breaking. The passenger being profiled is Dr. Julian Hayes, CEO of Zenith Technologies. He owns the company that runs this jet. It took 90 seconds for the update to trend worldwide. And just like that, the narrative shattered. Julian didn't gloat. He didn't stand. He looked Sarah directly in the eye. "You just profiled your employer. And you did it in front of the world." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was accountability arriving. And it was only getting started. The truth now hung in the air, heavier than turbulence. Sarah Mitchell stood at the front of the cabin, still trying to wear authority like a badge, but it was unraveling, thread by thread. Her eyes darted between Julian and the forward display, where his photo had just appeared under the headline, "Tech billionaire allegedly profiled on his own jet," and yet she still clung to control. "We've had enough disruption," she announced, her voice tight with panic, masked in the clipped cadence of professionalism. "I am now requiring financial verification for continued occupancy in first class." Gasps broke through the hum of the engines. She turned to Julian. "Sir, I'll need to see proof of payment or credentials right now." Julian didn't answer immediately. His gaze held hers steady and deliberate. The silence wasn't weakness. It was a pause before the tide. Then Thomas Blake joined her, arms stiff at his sides, trying to force authority back into the moment. "You're refusing to comply with policy," he barked. "That's grounds for removal." Julian's voice was calm, but it pierced the facade. "What policy requires a passenger to disclose financials to sit in their assigned seat?" Thomas stepped forward, fists clenched. "I said, get off the plane." The entire cabin fell still, phones hovered in mid-air recording. Nobody blinked. Then Richard Holt, arrogant, cruel, and emboldened, rose like a cartoon villain, waving his platinum badge in the air. "This is what a priority passenger looks like," he yelled, pointing at Julian. "And that is what an imposter looks like. Try economy, sir, if they'll even let you on." Julian didn't move. His silence now thundered louder than the outbursts. Emma Walsh stood by the galley, gripping her tablet with white knuckles. She didn't make eye contact. Instead, she spoke to no one in particular. "Security's on the way. We've flagged this as disruptive behavior." She logged the final note on her screen. "Subject failed verification. Escalate." Then Lucas Grant appeared. He was tall, early 40s, white-dressed in the crisp, quiet uniform of Zenith Aviation's onboard security leads. He walked like a man with orders. No questions, no empathy. He stopped in front of Julian, towering above him. "Sir, I need you to put away your device and vacate this seat immediately." Julian didn't answer, so Lucas reached down and smacked the tablet from Julian's tray. It clattered to the ground with a sharp, humiliating thud. Gasps erupted. A woman in row 3D covered her mouth. Even passengers who had remained silent couldn't pretend anymore. Liam's thumbs moved furiously. Security just hit DeHaze's tablet. Physical contact made. This is assault. Zenith fail. Julian raised one hand slowly, not in surrender, but in warning. "You just crossed a line," he said softly. Lucas didn't flinch. "We've been authorized by the captain. Move." But back at HQ, Elena Ruiz's voice rang out over Julian's earpiece. "Julian, initiate Protocol 303. We're logging everything. You are now the acting authority aboard this aircraft." Without breaking eye contact, Julian tapped twice on his ring, a silent signal sent straight to HQ. Across Zenith systems, audio logs, video feeds, passenger lists, and crew communications began syncing and backing up. Then Anukika spoke, Sir Richard Holt's badge, the one he waved. "It's a fake. Credentials expired last year. We're logging it now." Julian nodded once. No surprise, just confirmation. Elena's filing a passenger ethics violation against his firm. Back in the cabin, Sarah folded her arms like a bluff. "You're now being detained under internal aviation protocol." Richard leaned forward with a twisted grin. "You're nothing but a tech guy with a seat you didn't earn." Julian's reply was barely above a whisper. "You've all made your choices. Now you'll live with them." Emma stepped closer, eyes still glued to her screen. "We've got confirmation from the pilot. Remove him." At that moment, Anukika texted Liam directly. "They're violating corporate protocol. Post everything. Let the public see." Liam didn't hesitate. He hit upload. A 2-minute video stitched together the dismissal, the slurs, the fake badge, and the slap of the tablet. It was raw, undeniable. Within minutes it was trending across the globe. And still the final blow had not yet landed. Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't wave a badge. He simply tapped the final command into his smart ring and said calmly, "Anukika, patch me through to Eleanor." Seconds later, her voice came through the cabin speaker, loud, unmistakable, and final. "This is Elena Ruiz, Corporate Counsel for Zenith Technologies and parent holder of Zenith Aviation. We are confirming that Dr. Julian Hayes is listed on this flight as part of an internal audit. Any actions taken to remove him constitute a breach of internal protocol and will trigger immediate legal review." Gasps rippled through the cabin like thunder. A woman in row 1C covered her mouth. Someone near the rear whispered, "He owns this airline." Sarah Mitchell froze. Thomas Blake took a slow, almost imperceptible step back. Lucas Grant blinked. His hand hovered inches from Julian's arm, but never made contact again. Julian sat still, composed, powerful. Then in that same serene tone he said, "I am the CEO of Zenith Technologies. This aircraft is mine, and your time on it is over." The atmosphere flipped like a coin landing on its edge. The pilot, the first officer, the flight attendant, and the security lead all now faced a truth they could no longer duck behind policy to avoid. From HQ, Elena added, "Expect formal notices by the time this flight touches down." Liam posted his final clip of the hour. They humiliated him, denied him, hit him. Then they found out he's the boss. The man they tried to erase just erased their careers. Up front, Sarah Mitchell looked as if the wind had been knocked from her lungs. Her voice rose shrill, desperate. "Lucas," she barked, "remove him immediately. This is a policy breach." But Lucas didn't move. He stood still, processing the shift in gravity around him. He was no longer taking orders from someone in uniform. He was standing inches away from the man who could dismantle his future with a sentence. Around them, passengers weren't just observers anymore. Phones were up. Murmurs filled the air. One man in row 2B whispered, "This changes everything." Then Richard Holt stood up again, tone sharp with panic. "Why are we delaying this?" he shouted, looking for support. "The man doesn't belong here." Silence answered him. Not agreement, not rebellion, just silence, cold, heavy, and condemning. And then from that silence a voice rose. It came from Malik Jordan. "You keep saying he doesn't belong," Malik said quietly, powerfully. "But I wonder, Richard, what makes you so sure? Is it his clothes, his skin, or the fact that he didn't bow to you?" Sarah snapped. "Stay out of this, sir. You're not involved." But Malik didn't back down. He folded his arms. "I am now." Back in Zenith HQ, Anukika stared at her screen. Her voice sharpened. "Julian Emma just locked your flight log. She's trying to erase your record of even being on this jet." Julian's eyes narrowed, but his body stayed calm. "Tell Elena." Elena's voice was immediate. "I'm unlocking the override. All internal logs are now protected under legal protocol. That's a violation of FAA and corporate policy. They've just crossed into criminal misconduct." The cabin now felt like a courtroom. Julian rose slowly, then faced the crew and asked, "You want to escalate? Fine. But before you do, ask yourselves, are you absolutely certain you know who you're talking to?" Sarah backed up. Thomas was visibly sweating. "He's bluffing," she hissed. But Thomas shook his head slightly. "Captain, maybe we should wait for confirmation." Julian turned to Lucas. "You grabbed my device. You raised your voice. You touched me. In front of witnesses, in front of cameras. Do you still believe I'm just another passenger?" Lucas blinked and stepped back. Then one of the front cabin displays changed again. Liam had uploaded a full timeline of the incident, minute by minute, how a billionaire CEO was profiled on his own jet. Reuters picked it up. NBC followed. Aviation watchdogs issued breaking reports. Passengers gasped as the forward screen refreshed again. Zenith Aviation staff under fire. After discrimination, incident high-value clients begin pulling bookings. Sarah's mouth twitched. "I don't care who you are," she snapped. "You're violating the chain of command." Julian turned, voice still calm. "No, you violated dignity, ethics, and corporate trust. And now you'll be held accountable." From HQ, Anukika's voice returned. "Julian Protocol 3 is finalized. Disciplinary pathway approved. Your orders are now binding." Elena's voice followed. "You are officially the acting authority on this flight. Security will stand down at your directive." Julian turned slowly to face the 4 crew members. Captain Sarah Mitchell, First Officer Thomas Blake, Flight Attendant Emma Walsh, Security Lead Lucas Grant. He paused. The silence was absolute. "Effective immediately, you are all relieved of duty. Terminated. Pending legal review." The cabin went silent. Phones filmed. No one breathed. Then Julian turned. "Richard Holt, you are banned from all Zenith Aviation charters indefinitely." Sarah's face flushed with disbelief. "You can't fire me. I'm the captain of this flight." Julian didn't blink. "And I'm the owner of this aircraft. My authority supersedes yours. Elena's voice echoed once more across the intercom. This is official. All orders issued by Dr. Hayes are legally binding and supported by Zenith Technologies. Remaining on board will constitute trespassing. Thomas collapsed into his seat. Lucas looked away. Emma clutched her tablet like a life preserver, and the reckoning had only just begun. Julian stood alone in the aisle, but he didn't look alone. He looked inevitable. Before anyone else could speak, he turned back to Eleanor through his earpiece. Eleanor, he asked, his voice calm but resolute, has corporate reviewed their complaint history? Her answer came with the weight of buried years finally uncovered. We have. Sarah Mitchell has 20 logged complaints for racial profiling over the last 3 years, all sealed hidden by internal manipulation. A beat. And every single one of those complaints was buried by First Officer Thomas Blake. In the cabin, the temperature seemed to drop. Sarah's face twisted in disbelief. Thomas let out an audible sigh and dropped his head into his hands. Emma looked away. Lucas stared at the floor. From HQ, Anukika added, "It's over." Complaints were blocked, but the audit caught everything. They're exposed. Liam posted again, fingers lightning fast. Hidden history of profiling uncovered. Crew fired, passengers cheer, CEO reclaims the sky. Underneath, a comment from a passenger read, "We just watched justice happen in real time." Julian looked around the cabin, his cabin. Then wordlessly, he exited for a moment and returned wearing a tailored navy suit, the silver Zenith Technologies pin gleaming just below his collar. He didn't walk like a man. He moved like gravity had shifted around him. Even the sound of the engines seemed quieter. Sarah stood stiffly by the cockpit door, arms crossed, disbelief clinging to her like cold rain. She blinked at him, voice brittle. "You again." Julian stopped 3 feet in front of her. His voice rang out no longer just for her, but for every soul aboard. Captain Sarah Mitchell, First Officer Thomas Blake, Flight Attendant Emma Walsh, Security Lead Lucas Grant, you are all relieved of duty, effective immediately. Then he turned to the passengers. You are now witnessing the termination of Zenith Aviation personnel under violation of corporate ethics, profiling policies, and breach of internal protocols. All actions are being logged in real time. Gasps filled the air, phones rose again. Emma stepped forward, desperation leaking from her eyes. This is outrageous. You can't just— Julian raised his hand. She froze. I'm to Julian Hayes, CEO of Zenith Technologies, owner of Zenith Aviation, and the man whose identity you tried to erase in front of witnesses. He turned to Liam. Thank you for logging the truth. Liam nodded, still typing, as if each word was a nail sealing a coffin. Thomas muttered under his breath, he's bluffing. But then the intercom crackled to life. This is Elena Ruiz, came the voice. All orders issued by Dr. Hayes are authorized. Corporate oversight is active. If any of the aforementioned crew remain on board, past this statement, they will be trespassing. Sarah's jaw fell slightly open, but no words came out. Thomas collapsed back into his seat, defeated. Lucas unclipped his badge and handed it silently to a nearby passenger. Emma looked around for anyone to defend her. No one moved. Then Julian turned once more, Richard Holt. The man straightened in his seat, jaw set, pride bruised. You're not a crew member, Julian said, but your behavior, documented and confirmed, violated our passenger code of conduct. You are hereby banned from all Zenith Aviation charters, effective immediately and permanently. Richard barked a short, bitter laugh. You think you can erase me? I'm not erasing you, Julian replied. You did that yourself. I'm just enforcing the consequences. Liam's post went live seconds later. Dr. Hayes doesn't yell, doesn't threaten. He delivers consequences like a mirror, calm, clear, final. At that moment, the forward display changed again. Reuters, headline: Zenith CEO fires entire jet crew after being profiled, identity revealed, mid-flight sub-headline: hidden bias complaints uncovered. Industry faces reckoning. Elena's voice echoed once more. We've concluded our internal log audit. Captain Mitchell had 20 bias complaints. 17 of them were suppressed by First Officer Blake. Emma Walsh manually altered at least 8 passenger logs this quarter. Lucas Grant violated conduct policy during today's incident. The cabin became a courtroom. Truth the only verdict. Sarah finally broke. This isn't fair. You set us up. Julian didn't flinch. No, I set a standard. You chose how to meet it or how to fail. A slow ripple of applause moved through the cabin. Quiet, deliberate, earned. One woman clapped with tears in her eyes. A man near the back whispered, "Thank you." Another leaned forward and murmured, "This changes everything." Julian nodded once. Then he faced the entire cabin, not just the guilty. Zenith Aviation was built on one belief that luxury doesn't excuse bias. That comfort should never come at the cost of human dignity. Today was a test not of me but of this system. And now it will change permanently. From HQ. Anukika's voice came through again. "Julian, you need to hear this." He waited. Eleanor just found a pattern. Emma and Thomas used a code to flag passengers' visual mismatch. Julian's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" Eleanor answered immediately. "An informal tag. It marked passengers who didn't look like they belonged in first class. Most of them were people of color." The cabin went still. Julian took one breath. Just one. Then he raised his voice not in anger, but with finality. "That ends today." Liam's next post was instant. Visual mismatch. That was the code they used. But Julian Hayes didn't just match the profile, he built it and then burned the old one to the ground. Richard Holt stood again, shaking, pointing around the cabin like a man desperate to reclaim control. "You think this is justice, you're just tearing things down." But from row 3, a calm voice answered, "No, he's cleaning house." It came from a passenger who hadn't spoken all flight, an older gentleman in a muted grey suit, the kind of presence that didn't need volume to carry weight. Emma tried one last plea, her voice trembling as she stepped forward. "I have a family." Julian met her eyes unblinking. "And how many passengers did you erase without a second thought?" Emma had no answer. She turned, shoulders slumped, and walked toward the exit, past cameras, past judgment, past her own undoing. Sarah followed, head down, lips tight with disbelief. Lucas trailed behind her, already reaching for a phone that would soon stop working. Only Thomas remained, frozen, deflated. A man crushed not just by what he'd done, but by what he'd become. Eventually he stood too slowly, shamefully, and joined the exodus. Julian stood tall in the center aisle, the entire cabin now focused on him. Not because he'd demanded it, but because he had earned it. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was something larger, a symbol of what leadership looks like when it's faced with hate and chooses truth instead. And he wasn't done. He raised his wrist slightly, one swipe across his smartwatch screen, and the cabin lit up. Zenith Equity Program activated. Throughout the aircraft, seatback monitors and overhead displays came alive with a new emblem, a silver horizon line cutting through a golden sky. It wasn't just a logo, it was a line in the sand. Julian turned to the cabin once again. His voice was strong, resonant. Today wasn't about one seat or one insult. It was about a culture, one that still believes appearances define worth. He paused, letting it sink in. That ends now. The passengers were motionless breath held in collective understanding. Zenith Aviation will no longer be the brand of luxury for the few. We will be the gold standard for fairness, for dignity, for humanity. From headquarters, Anukika's voice filled his earpiece. CEO channel active. PR department is holding press calls. Corporate just issued a statement confirming the firings and the program. Elena followed swiftly. All log entries verified. FAA notified of immediate reforms. The FAA Deputy Director just responded on record. They support our initiative. At seat 2B, Malik Jordan leaned forward slightly. "Julian, will this reach beyond this plane?" Julian turned toward him, calm but fierce. "Yes. Every passenger deserves to fly without fear of being judged. This plane is the first step." And it was, because back at Zenith HQ, systems were moving. AI modules were being uploaded to every aircraft in the fleet. Diversity training modules pushed to every crew terminal. Oversight dashboards activated across departments. But the shadows hadn't cleared yet. A red flag appeared on Anukika's screen. Her voice returned low and tight. "Julian, we've just intercepted data." Emma attempted to upload falsified compliance reports last week. She was part of a covert crew group that manipulated audits to hide patterns of discrimination. Julian's expression didn't waver. "Elena, I'm freezing all related accounts. That network ends tonight." And then Julian turned back to the cabin voice, steady. For those wondering if this was isolated, it wasn't. A crew faction operated without accountability. They buried complaints, flagged passengers based on skin color attire and quiet assumptions. He took a step forward. "That ends today too." From HQ, Elena announced, "Julian, True Sky has launched across all Zenith aircraft. Inconsistencies will be flagged. No misconduct will ever be buried again." From the back of the cabin, a woman whispered, "He didn't just stop the plane. He changed the flight path of the whole company." Liam, still typing, posted again, "True Sky is live. Zenith isn't just making promises, it's writing policy in real time." Julian closed his eyes for just a breath, not in exhaustion, but in reflection. This wasn't revenge, it was repair. And it was only the beginning. As he looked out over the cabin, this vessel of revelation passengers began to rise. One row at a time, applauding not out of spectacle, but out of respect. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Justice had already landed. The flight never left the tarmac that day, but something far more significant had taken off. By the time passengers began to disembark, the headlines were everywhere. Not about luxury, not about service, but about accountability, truth, and a man who dared to hold his own company to the standard others had tried to bury. As Julian stepped off the Gulfstream G650 and onto the private terminal ramp, he wasn't followed by silence, he was followed by reform. Within hours, the consequences rippled outward like shockwaves. Sarah Mitchell, Thomas Blake, Emma Walsh, and Lucas Grant were each placed under FAA investigation. Their certifications were immediately suspended, pending a full review. The FAA issued a rare same-day statement. "We are deeply concerned by the findings made public by Zenith Technologies and have opened an expedited inquiry into all involved crew members." But it didn't stop there. Once news of Richard Holt's behavior reached his firm, Zenith Technologies terminated all existing contracts with Holt & Co. Within days, 3 more partner companies followed suit, citing ethics violations and breach of public trust. Inside Zenith headquarters, Anukika updated Julian on the internal sweep. 6 additional employees, she said, all tied to Emma and Thomas's manipulation ring. "We've already terminated them. Legal is building a case to forward to federal regulators." Elena added quietly, "Julian, you didn't just protect your name, you created a blueprint for equity." But Julian wasn't chasing applause. He wasn't building a moment. He was building a legacy. 1 week later, on the sunlit tarmac outside Zenith's main hangar, a freshly repainted jet stood gleaming. On its side below the wings, a new emblem shimmered beneath the words "Zenith Fund, opening the skies for all." Julian stepped up to the podium, flanked by media partners and staff. He wasn't there to boast. He was there to launch something bigger than himself. The Zenith Fund, he announced, will be a private foundation seeded with $30 million of my personal capital. Its mission is simple: to give access to aviation education, mentorship, and career placement to those who are told they don't belong in the sky. He then turned to Malik Jordan, the young black tech founder who had stood up during the flight. "You didn't just speak truth," Julian told him. "You stood firm when it mattered. That's leadership." Malik, eyes glassy, nodded and accepted Julian's invitation to become the first advisory board member of the fund. Beside them stood Liam Chen, no longer just a blogger, no longer just an observer. At the podium, he shared his truth. "I came aboard that flight to write about service. I left it a witness to change." Julian didn't just demand justice, he showed us that power doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand. Back at HQ, Anukika personally oversaw the fund's launch. The first cohort 5 high school students from Baltimore, Detroit, and Houston, young dreamers who wanted to become pilots, engineers, and aviation designers. Julian visited them quietly during their orientation. He shook each of their hands, listened to each of their stories. When asked why he started the fund, he answered simply, "Because when a door closes on someone who deserves to walk through it, we don't knock louder. We build a new door Then came the twist no one expected. A retired pilot, now in his 70s, posted a letter online, handwritten, scanned, honest. In it, he admitted, "A decade ago, I filed a bias complaint against Sarah Mitchell. I watched it disappear. I was too afraid to speak, but Dr. Hayes gave me the courage I didn't have back then. She didn't start this pattern, but she kept it alive, and he ended it." Reuters ran the letter under a new headline, "Pilot Confession Confirms Decade of Hidden Bias. Zenith, CEOs Stand Spurs Industry Reckoning." Julian read it alone in his office, then folded the printout gently and placed it beside the framed launch certificate of the Zenith Fund. "It was never about one flight," he said quietly. "It was about a culture that needed to be unmasked." And now the unmasking was complete. Months passed, but the impact of that one flight only grew. Zenith Aviation didn't just patch the holes, it rebuilt the fuselage of its identity from the inside out. Every aircraft under its flag was now equipped with True Sky, the AI-powered audit system Julian had quietly envisioned long before the incident. Its job was simple: watch, record, flag, and protect. It didn't monitor to punish. It monitored to prevent. Every crew member knew their actions would be logged. Every interaction mattered. Every assumption had a consequence. At every Zenith terminal, a new display lit up behind check-in counters, Zenith Equity Dashboard, updated in real time, zero tolerance, total transparency. Passengers could view staff ratings, incident audits, and cultural training metrics, not marketing fluff but measurable policy. And they responded. Bookings surged. Trust was rebuilt not with slogans but with systems. As for the Zenith Fund, it flourished. In just 6 months, over 600 students from underserved communities had applied to aviation academies, engineering programs, and mentorship internships through the foundation. Julian personally mentored some of them. But the real shift, it was in the culture. Other airlines took note. CEOs called. Policies were rewritten. And while no company changed overnight, one jet on one morning had started a storm no one could ignore. And Julian, he didn't chase the cameras. He chose something quieter. He chose presence. He understood now, perhaps more than ever, that leadership wasn't measured by titles or fleets or net worth. It was measured by what you do the moment someone tries to shrink you. He never yelled. He never retaliated. He simply stood. And when the time came, he moved mountains without raising his voice. From that day forward, whenever someone whispered, "You don't belong here," there was a story in the sky strong enough to answer, "Yes, I do." And this seat was earned. So if you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told you were less than what you are, remember Julian. Remember that silence can be louder than rage, and justice doesn't always roar through the cabin. Sometimes it walks down the aisle with a single step and changes everything.